What if a miracle happened so obvious, so undeniable, that the only way to reject it was to attack the person who experienced it? What if someone who had been blind his entire life suddenly gained sight, and instead of celebration, he faced interrogation? And what if the investigation meant to disprove a miracle only ended up revealing something even greater? The story continues in the Gospel of John, chapter 9. A man who had been blind since birth has just experienced the impossible. After encountering Jesus and obeying his instruction to wash in the pool of Siloam, his eyes were opened. For the first time in his life, he could see. The neighbors were confused. Some recognized him as the beggar who had sat in the streets for years. Others insisted it could not be the same man. Eventually, the crowd decided to bring him to the Pharisees. The Pharisees were religious authorities responsible for interpreting the law of Moses and preserving Jewish tradition. If a miracle had truly happened, they would be expected to examine it carefully. But there was a problem. The healing had taken place on the Sabbath. The Sabbath was a sacred day of rest in Jewish law. Over time, strict rules had developed about what could and could not be done on that day. Even small actions could be considered violations if they resembled work, and according to their interpretation, making mud with saliva could be seen as a form of labor. So before they even examined the miracle itself, the Pharisees were already troubled by the timing. When the healed man stood before them, they asked him how he had received his sight. He answered simply, "He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." The explanation was straightforward. No complicated story, no exaggeration. Yet the reaction among the Pharisees was divided. Some said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." To them, the violation of their Sabbath rules was enough to disqualify Jesus immediately. But others asked a question that revealed the weakness of that argument. How can a man who is a sinner do such signs? They recognized the tension between the miracle and the accusation. If Jesus were truly acting against God, how could he perform such a powerful act of healing? The group became divided, so they turned again to the man who had been healed. "What do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes?" This question placed the former beggar in a difficult position. Moments earlier, he had been simply a man celebrating the gift of sight. Now he was being asked to give an opinion about the identity of Jesus in front of the most powerful religious authorities in the community. But his answer was honest and direct. He is a prophet. It was the most logical conclusion he could draw. Prophets in Israel's history had been known as people through whom God performed powerful acts. If someone had given sight to a man born blind, that person must have been sent by God. But the Pharisees were not satisfied. Rather than accept the testimony, they began to question whether the miracle had happened at all. They suspected deception. So they called the man's parents. The authorities asked them 3 questions. "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" The parents faced a difficult situation. On one hand, they knew the truth. Their son had indeed been born blind. They had lived with that reality for his entire life. But they also understood the danger of speaking too boldly about Jesus. At that time, anyone who openly confessed Jesus as the Messiah could be expelled from the synagogue. That meant losing social standing, community relationships, and possibly even economic support. So the parents answered cautiously, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind." They confirmed the basic facts. But when asked how the healing happened, they avoided giving a direct answer. How he now sees, we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. Their response reveals the fear that surrounded the situation. They were willing to confirm the miracle, but unwilling to become involved in the controversy. So the Pharisees called the healed man back again. This time, their tone was different. "Give glory to God," they said. "We know that this man is a sinner." This phrase might sound respectful at first, but it actually carried pressure. They were urging the man to distance himself from Jesus and admit that the miracle had come from some other source. But the man refused to deny what had happened. His response became one of the most memorable lines in the entire story. "Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." His words were simple, powerful, and impossible to argue with. The Pharisees continued pressing him. "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" But the man was growing frustrated. He had already answered these questions, so he replied with a touch of boldness that must have shocked the authorities. "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" The response carried a hint of irony. The man who had once been a beggar now stood before the most respected teachers of the law and challenged them. The reaction was immediate. They insulted him. "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses." The Pharisees insisted that their authority came from Moses, the great lawgiver of Israel. They believed that loyalty to Moses meant rejecting the claims of Jesus. But the healed man responded with remarkable courage and logic. "Why, this is an amazing thing," he said. "You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes." He pointed out something obvious. Everyone knew that God listened to those who followed him. If this man were not from God, he said, he could do nothing. His argument was difficult to refute. Never before in history had anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. Yet here was the evidence standing in front of them. A man who had lived his entire life in darkness now saw the world clearly. The miracle demanded an explanation. But instead of accepting the conclusion, the Pharisees reacted with anger. They dismissed his testimony entirely. "You were born in utter sin," they said, "and would you teach us?" And with that, they cast him out. The man who had just experienced one of the greatest miracles in the city was expelled by the religious authorities. This moment reveals something powerful about the human heart. Sometimes people are so committed to protecting their beliefs that they refuse to accept evidence that challenges them. The Pharisees were experts in the law. They knew the scriptures. They expected the Messiah to come someday. Yet when a miracle stood before them, they could not accept it because it did not fit their expectations. The healed man, on the other hand, had no theological training. He had no position of authority. But he had something the others lacked. He had experienced the work of Jesus personally. His understanding of Jesus was still growing. At first he called him the man called Jesus. Then he recognized him as a prophet. Soon he would come to understand even more. But already he had grasped a simple truth. Something extraordinary had happened, and the one who made it possible must have come from God. The investigation that was meant to disprove the miracle only highlighted it. The more the Pharisees questioned, the clearer the evidence became. The man who once begged on the streets now stood with confidence and clarity. And the leaders who claimed to see the truth revealed their own blindness. This story reminds us that spiritual blindness can exist even among those who appear most knowledgeable. Seeing truth requires more than intelligence or tradition. It requires humility. It requires a willingness to follow evidence wherever it leads. And it requires openness to the possibility that God may work in ways we did not expect. The man born blind began the story unable to see anything. But by the end of this investigation, he saw more clearly than the people who interrogated him. His eyes had been opened, not only physically, but spiritually, and the light that entered his life could not be hidden. Thank you for watching this video. If this story helped you understand the powerful moment when the Pharisees investigated the healing in John chapter 9, please like the video, follow the Holy Path Insights channel, and share this video with someone who enjoys discovering the deeper meaning behind the Bible. Your support helps us continue bringing these incredible stories and their lessons to people around the world.